What would you say if I told you the nuclear weapons we see in the Fallout games are drastically different from the nuclear weapons we have here in real life? Today, we'll look at the differences. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. So obviously, nuclear weapons play a huge role in the Fallout games. Not only is one of the most consequential events in the entire history of the Fallout games, the Great War, entirely reliant on nuclear weapons, but they appear several times throughout the games. But what if I was to tell you that these aren't the same as the nuclear weapons that are in the world today? Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So nuclear weapons in Fallout are actually very different from what we use today. The biggest difference comes to how they do damage. In real life, nuclear weapons are designed to deliver a kinetic punch. Basically, the explosion sets out a shockwave that levels a huge chunk of land. This would be very destructive, and the radiation is basically just a byproduct of that. The main goal of these weapons is then to destroy their target with explosive force and not the radioactive fallout that would follow. However, in Fallout, the weapons appear to work completely differently. It seems like the idea behind nuclear weapons in Fallout was closer to what we would consider a neutron bomb. A neutron bomb is a nuclear weapon designed to deliver a relatively low-yield explosion, but a very large amount of radioactive material. The end result of this is it basically scatters the radioactive material over a large area. And most of the damage from one of these bombs is done by the radioactive material and not the explosion itself. Now, neutron bombs are not very common, and they're really not deployed in any significant numbers in real life. However, most of the weapons in Fallout appear to be of this type. Just look at the Capital Wasteland, for example. You would think DC would be completely leveled were it hit with several nuclear bombs. But most of its buildings are still standing, albeit in states of disrepair. And the few locations that we know were directly hit with nuclear weapons have a small crater and basically nothing else. And for a direct example, let's look at the bomb in Megaton. The nuclear weapon in Megaton is a great example of how different it is from nuclear weapons in our world. While the mushroom cloud seen from Tenpenny Tower may look very large, the actual blast radius seems to be pretty small. The nearby town of Springvale is relatively unaffected. Instead, the blast seems to really only affect Megaton itself. That being said, it scatters radioactive debris all over the region. But that's not the only way these weapons are different. The next big difference is more of a strategic one. Unlike weapons today, which are delivered almost exclusively by ballistic missiles either from land-based silos or ballistic missile submarines, it appears a good portion of the nuclear weapons in the Fallout universe were delivered via bomber. Good evidence for this is the bomb in Megaton, which really wouldn't be there in any other circumstance. Now, it does appear that they did have ballistic missiles and that they were used during the war. For example, we see ballistic missiles in Fallout 3, New Vegas, and Fallout 76. But a lot of the damage still suggests that many of these weapons were delivered by bombers. Another interesting difference in specifically the submarine-launched ballistic missiles is their numbers. In our world, the submarine-launched ballistic missile is probably one of the most deadly weapons ever developed by mankind. Most of these submarines carry roughly 16 of these missiles to make them cost-effective because they're also very expensive weapons platforms. In the Fallout universe, we actually can explore a Chinese ballistic missile submarine in Fallout 4, and this submarine has a whopping 6 missiles on board. To me, this means that there was probably far fewer submarine-launched ballistic missiles involved in the conflict. All of this, however, makes sense. It fits very well with the aesthetic of the world before the war. In the late 50s and the early 60s, the era that the game is trying to emulate, this would have been how weapons would have been delivered in a war between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both forces had a relatively small number of ballistic missiles and would rely primarily on bombers to deliver their weapons. So generally, I think the strangeness of the delivery systems are more a byproduct of the era that the game is trying to emulate. But these weapons were still very terrifying and they still did a lot of damage, and if you want to know more about the war where these weapons were utilized, I'll leave a link up here to my video on the Great War. And I want you to let me know down below what you think would be more effective in a nuclear war, the weapons we have today, or the weapons depicted in Fallout. And if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.